So you spent 2 weeks searching for a candidate after the client gave you the vacancy and you found a few solid profiles. But then the client replies saying, not quite right, or not just yet, or even worse, we've already filled the role internally. Because if that sounds familiar, even if you did fill the role, the next problem that you might encounter is going to be, we can't pay you on time. And all of it can be boiled down into a simple qualification error that I see happening time and time again. So just picture it as a recruiter. You've now got a message or an email saying, hey, we've got this vacancy, can you help us fill the role? And because you're excited, you then start searching and you go ahead and pour hours into generating a candidate. With one thing that you just missed, just because somebody gave you a vacancy does not mean it is a perfect client for you to now go and spend hours of time on. And if you haven't already, you're going to start recognizing a pattern. And that pattern remains the same because right at the beginning, the client is fully engaged. They're very responsive. They come back to you right up until the moment you send the CV. Now, all of a sudden, there's a few delays. And you just know deep down that something isn't quite right. And the root cause is simple. The client wasn't qualified, or at least not qualified in detail. Think about it this way. Would you ever take a candidate's CV that you've never spoken to just because they sent you the CV and say, hey, can you help me find a job? All because they sent you a few bullet points on an email along with their CV. And instead of qualifying them in more detail, you now start sending them emails saying, hey, I've got this opportunity, I've got this opportunity, I've got this opportunity. And for each email that you send, you write down a load of details about why it's a good opportunity for them. Of course not, you wouldn't do that because you haven't understood their motives, you haven't understood why they're even looking in the first place, you haven't got any personal buy-in, there's no commitment, there's nothing there. But for some reason, when it comes to clients, sometimes an email is enough. Because here's what's happening on the client side. They've realized that they have a need, so they post the requirement on Indeed, then they post it on LinkedIn, then they send out a few messages to people that they might know. And after they've tried for a little while, then they send you an email saying, hey, can you give us a hand with this? Or maybe you've reached out to them and then got the exact same response. And when you don't ask any questions up front, then you're about to run into some problems. Because what if they have spoken to several other recruiters? What happens if they're already retained with another client? What happens if they're already retained with another recruiter? And it sounds really simple, but all it is that there were some questions that were missed up front. So let me just be crystal clear about the cost. It's not just the time wasted in searching for candidates that are just never going to fit this job and then you're not going to get paid, but it's also the opportunity cost. Because now you've dedicated so many hours in filling this requirement and it feels like all the time has been wasted. Because it has, and in that same time that you spent wasting trying to fill this requirement from a client, you could have found another client. Or you could have consolidated a relationship with another client. You could have re-engaged another client. You could have reached out to previous clients who you've done business with and they haven't given you a new requirement. And then the worst part really fades in because now you start to doubt everything. Especially when this happens repeatedly, you just lose confidence. Firstly, in your processes, then in your work, then in your ability, then in the longevity of your business, and then you just start to go deeper. Maybe automation doesn't work. Maybe cold calling doesn't work. Maybe this doesn't work. And you just begin to doubt what has worked for you for several years prior. But the problem was never your outreach or how you're making contact with your clients and candidates. It was always down to how you qualified them. So here's exactly what I did to make sure that I got past this problem. And that is that when a client gives me a vacancy, the bare minimum is a phone call. Ideally a meeting, even better if you can do it in person. And when you do get onto that call, you have to understand things in a few details. Where are you in the hiring process? What have you done so far? Understanding this will explain to you and help you understand what the client has already done, which you can then go and avoid so that you're not duplicating any efforts. You can also ask if they've engaged other recruitment agencies for the same requirement. And do you have any candidates who are in the interview stage at the moment? And last but not least, have you made any offers to candidates at the moment? And if not, why not? Because if they haven't made any offers, it could be because of a number of reasons. Maybe they're working with bad recruiters. Maybe they're putting their energy in the wrong place. Maybe they've got reasons why they're struggling to hire, which are completely out of your control. And these questions also tell you how long they've been looking, how difficult it is. And by asking these questions, you then come to realize, number one, how urgent the requirement is, but also the likelihood that you have of filling the requirement. Because if you don't fill the requirement, you're not going to get paid. Or if you do charge up front for the requirement and then you don't fill it, then you end up with a sour relationship. And this is also one of the reasons why I talk so much about niche and why it's so important to be niche focused. Because even if you do find a candidate for this particular requirement, and let's say they have filled the requirement, then you should have a load of other clients who'd be interested in the same profile of candidate. But let's just take for a moment that you decide, you know what, I don't want to work on this vacancy right now. I'm going to go and try something else completely different, or just go and look for another client. Then a bold move that you can make is, hey, Mr. Client, it sounds like you've already got everything covered. There's nothing here for me to check in right now because you've already got somebody at offer stage. You've already got people in interview stage. You're already talking to other recruiters. There's no point me duplicating efforts. So instead of me getting to work right now, I'm going to let you carry on for a few weeks. I hope you fill the vacancy. But if we catch up in a few weeks' time and then, God forbid, the candidate didn't turn up on their first day, or the candidate wasn't quite right, or the references don't come back okay, then we can do a much more deeper dive into your requirements and then I can give you a hand with it. And what might come as a surprise is the client client's reaction, because recruiters for some reason just struggle to say no. If the requirement is not right, just say no. Like, now is not the right time. Maybe we can pick this up at a later date. And I can still remember a moment when a client gave me a vacancy, and my response after qualifying it was, Mr. Client, the amount of time that is required into this vacancy, we don't have the capacity to run with it at the moment. So for the moment, I'm going to hold back. But if I open up in terms of capacity, I'll be back in contact with you. And there were two things that came from this. Number one, the client was surprised and appreciated the honesty. But I also got more buy-in from the client, because the client reached out to me 2 weeks later saying, hey, Mohammed, can you help us with this requirement now, because we've tried everything else and it's not quite gone to plan. So what might look like you're turning away an opportunity actually becomes a power move, because it pays you back later on down the line. So just to make sure that you avoid all of these mistakes, never take on a vacancy without a bare minimum of a phone call from a client. Ask the qualification questions that I've gave you, but also pay attention to the problems that you've encountered with previous clients and ask them questions relating to those problems so you can foresee any problems that you might encounter. What if they have a really slow interview process, or they take 7 weeks to give you feedback, or 8 weeks to issue an offer? All of these are things that will help you make your mind up on whether it's actually a good requirement for you to work on or not. And if they're already deep into a process of hiring to the point that they're already making offers and have several candidates at interview stage, then it's okay to say no. And then use that as leverage to continue building relationships, because that's one thing that you can never lose if you build a relationship with a client. All this because the clients that might seem like they're wasting your time right now are only wasting your time because they were never qualified properly in the first place. And if you just fix that, then all of a sudden you're only ever working on vacancies that are fully qualified. And for that, I have already made a more detailed explainer video where I list out some really, really good questions that you should ask when it comes to qualifying a candidate or a vacancy. You'll find that on my YouTube channel, but for now, I'll see you in the next video.